Leonard in England is a theist, pronouns are him, who says shadows of light prove God. Hey, Leonard, how
Hello?
are you? I
I'm
think
very well.
we're gonna need some explanation because I don't know what shadows are there shadows that
Yes,
aren't of light? Because it says shadows of light, and I'm like, are there shadows that aren't of light?
yes. I apologize. I wasn't sure exactly how to word it. But what I mean is, God is light. So when there's light all around, that is God. And so when like there's a shadow, because of somebody walking, that is because God is light.
Is this an analogy, or is God literally light? I just want to make sure I understand you correctly.
God is light.
How do we know that?
In John 16:32, yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. There's always light, and that is God.
I'm sorry,
So,
but
like,
you started quoting John 16.
Yeah, because God is light.
No. I asked you how we know that God is light. And you said because John 16:32 says, and then you quoted John
Apologies.
16:32, but then you added something because John 16:32 doesn't mention light at all.
No, yeah, you're right. My apologies.
But let's assume for a
I
second.
can't think of the exact.
Hang on, just
I
listen,
can't think of the exact word.
listen. Let's give you the 100% benefit of the doubt. And let's imagine that there's a verse in the Bible that says God is light. My question still stands. How do you know that God is light? Because the fact that even if there was a Bible verse that says God is light, that wouldn't be enough to confirm that God exists or that God is light. So how do we know that God is light?
Because God is everywhere.
Is light everywhere?
Yes. Even when a room is dark,
It's
there's
not
still light
everywhere. But how do you know that God is everywhere?
because God is everywhere. Because light.
Okay. I don't know
is God
what
a
we're going to
particle
do
or
here,
a wave?
Leonard.
Is God a particle or a wave?
Pardon?
Is God a particle or a wave?
I don't know what that means.
Is light a particle or a wave?
Light is light, and God is light.
So God is photons? I'm trying to, we have scientific definitions
I
of what
don't know what
light
you
is.
mean.
Okay.
God is light.
Just for clarity, Leonard. Is God okay? Is God sound?
Well, he talks to people, so yes, yeah, he can be as well. Yeah, God is everywhere.
How do you know that God is everywhere?
Because God is light, and light is everywhere.
Okay. I don't know how to talk to you, Leonard. We're asking you questions and you're saying things that are just absolutely 100% circular. God is light. How do you know that? Because God is everywhere. How do you know that? Because God is light. How do you know that? I'm asking, how can someone come to the knowledge that God is in fact everywhere? How do you come by that knowledge?
Um, it says so in the Bible.
Okay. Is it possible that the Bible might say something and that it's not true?
No, because the people that God wrote it. Why would God lie?
Okay. The Bible wasn't written by a God, and you're still so wow. You're saying that the Bible can't be wrong because it was written by God, but you're using the
Yes,
Bible to try to prove that there's a God. That's circular reasoning, and so it's absolutely 100% flawed. How do you
I don't know
know?
what that means.
I know you. I know you're gonna you either don't or you're gonna pretend that you don't. So because at this point, Leonard, is it raining outside right now?
It's nighttime.
It's not nighttime here.
Sometimes it
I
rains at
don't
night.
know where you are. I'm guessing you're in America.
My thing is, when I asked you if it was raining, instead of you telling me whether or not it's raining where you are, or saying it's probably raining somewhere, or saying you're unsure of where, if it's raining somewhere else or whatever, your answer was, it's nighttime. So, Leonard, I don't think you and
Okay.
I have
Um,
any hope of having any sort of productive conversation about anything because I don't seem to be able to ask you any question where we get any answer that is remotely in the ballpark of useful or on topic.
I
Can it
can only
rain?
apologize.
Can it rain at night?
Yes, of course it can.
Is it also possible that you could go through an entire nighttime and it doesn't rain?
Yeah, it doesn't rain every
Which
night.
which means Leonard, right, that whether or not it's nighttime is irrelevant to the question of whether or not it's raining, right?
The two are not connected.
Correct. So when I asked you if it was raining, why did you comment on whether or not it's nighttime?
I don't know. That was just the first thought that came into my mind.
Okay. If we can at least agree that you responded with something that wasn't relevant to the question, that's a start.
I can only apologize.
Okay. So where you're at right now, if you were to look outside the window, is it raining where you are now?
No.
Cool. Is God rain?
Yeah. Yes. God is everything.
But if God is rain and it's not raining where you are right now, then God isn't where you are right now.
God God's everything. So he's also like out there watching because he's everything.
Okay. So saying that God is rain doesn't carry any significance because whether there's rain or not, there's still God, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's also true for sound and light and all of those things, right?
Yes. God
Say.
God God is
So
light.
also light isn't everywhere. But if God is if God is everywhere and we found somewhere where there wasn't light, would God be there too?
Yes.
Cool. Then whether or not God is light or rain or sound is irrelevant because your belief is that God is everywhere and that whether or not there's light or rain or sound is irrelevant because God is everywhere. And so I'm asking you, how can I know that God is in fact everywhere?
Because everything exists. Like, if you look at
If Leonard,
anything,
Leonard, when you say
it's
everything
there,
exists, when you
which
say
means God
everything
made it.
exists, if everything except God stopped existing right now, would God still exist?
Like, if the whole world and the universe stopped,
Everything. If everything stopped existing except for God, would God still exist?
yes,
Cool.
because
Which means that
God is God.
which means that God exists whether anything exists or not, right?
God is everywhere. So yes, 'cause God is everywhere and everything.
How do you know that?
It's in the Bible,
Okay. Paul,
and
have you got
when
anything?
when you can see, you can see everything.
So, do you, Leonard? Do you know what a tautology is?
Do I know what is? Sorry, pardon.
A tautology. So basically,
No.
you seem to be defining God into existence by basically saying that everything that we're going to say. I feel like if I said, is cancer God, you would say yes, and if am I God, you would have to say yes. Like basically, God is not at this point a meaningful distinction from these things, because a tautology is essentially where everything is included in the set, right? And therefore, it's actually not that useful a thing to talk about, right? Because it's not useful to talk about any of
I
these
don't know what you
things.
mean.
Okay. Do you agree? You're basically saying, because you're basically by labeling everything God, you've made God a useless word. It's not a word that you can distinction. It's not a distinctive word from anything else. But I think we're going to have to leave that line of questioning. Are you aware that analogies exist? So, for example, when in the Bible, when God says that he spreads his wings of protection, are you imagining when you read those kind of verses that God is a chicken?
No, but
Okay.
God
So
can have
when God's
wings if he wants to.
Oh, I agree. If a
Is
God existed and wanted to have wings, he could. But you're understanding that in those verses,
Yeah.
you're not intended to imagine God is a chicken, right? And so when Jesus says, "I'm
Right.
the light of the
But
world," which is in
chicken,
John 8, which is what I think you're referring to, he may well have been trying to make an analogy, right? Maybe trying to use a expression, a metaphor.
chickens can't fly.
Right, but they do spread their wings. Okay, I think I might be done, Matt. I cannot tell if Leonard is legitimately not understanding what I'm saying. Perhaps this is on me, that I'm not saying words that make sense.
Yeah,
But I think we
it's
might
very
be at an
frustrating,
impasse.
and there's a few things. I'm sorry, Leonard, but there's some things that when we ask a question and you're like, I don't know what that means. Um, there's no way for me to
Well,
say this without being
I'm just
rude. I don't understand. How old are you?
34.
34.
Yeah.
I don't understand how someone who's 34 can function in society without understanding some of the things that you say you can't understand.
God helps me to understand what I need to understand.
How do you know
Like
what you need? How do you know that?
Because sometimes things can get, life can be stressful, and life can be hard sometimes. And so when it's hard, when life gets hard for me, um, I pray to God, and God helps me and
How?
tells me what I need.
Okay, so why didn't God tell you the things you needed to understand before you called in here today?
I don't know.
How often do you talk to God and get help?
Um, uh, Before I go to sleep, and when I wake up, and before eating, and once in the evening after reading my Bible.
Okay. And when God answers you, you hear an audible voice?
No,
But you said God was sound and
it's
that he
like
talks to people, and you know that God is sound because he talks to people. And yet now you're saying that when God talks to you, it's not sound?
my apologies. I don't mean like talks in a physical way. I
But
mean
you
like
said God
talks
was
in a.
sound. And you said God was sound because and you know he's sound because he talks to people. So are you saying that God talks to people in a way that's not sound?
Well, it's like sound in the mind
That's
is
not
different
sound.
to.
That's not sound. That's not what sound is. Sound is
But it's in the mind,
vibrations.
like
No,
when
no, no.
you
Sound
can
does
hear it.
not take place. No, sound is not in the mind. Sound, the voice that you hear in your head is not sound. When I clap my hands, when the microphone picks it up, that's sound. That is waves of air at specific vibrations. That's what sound is. Hearing, thinking in your head, that's not sound. So when you said God was sound because he talks to people, that was a mistake. You mean that God is sound because, well, he's everything. And that when God talks to people, he doesn't hear sound. So here's the thing. When you talk to God several times a day, when he explains
Yes.
things you need to know, how clear is he?
And sometimes very clear, sometimes not so clear, and sometimes God just leaves you to it.
So sometimes God is really clear, sometimes God is not clear at all, and sometimes it's
Yes,
unclear whether God is clear or not.
yes.
Aren't those all the possible
But
answers? I mean, haven't you just painted with
somebody
such a
in.
broad brush? How do you tell when God is giving you an answer versus when your brain comes up with something that's wrong and just makes you think God gave you the answer? How do you tell the difference?
Because I don't know how to answer that without sounding stupid, but sometimes God tells you.
How do you know? Why doesn't God tell me,
Usually
Leonard?
it's
Why doesn't God tell me? Why is God talking to you,
I
not giving you an understanding of things that you need to understand in order to be able to explain this stuff? When God could talk to me and tell me exactly what needs to be presented so that I can present arguments that aren't fallacious.
I don't know what that word means, but I don't know why God doesn't talk to you.
Why don't you ask him?
I'm I'm not God.
No, why don't you ask God why he doesn't talk to me?
I don't understand why God doesn't talk to you. I hope he
That's
does,
I know you don't
and I
understand,
hope he will.
Leonard. I'm saying, why don't you ask God why he won't talk to me?
Well, ask God now.
Do you think he'll answer you right now?
Probably not right now.
Okay. Well, you go ahead and leave and you ask God. You ask him tonight before you go to bed, ask him in the morning when you get up, ask him before your meals. You keep asking God why he doesn't talk to me until he gives you an answer, and then call back and let me know.
Okay. And I hope that he does talk to you. And I wish everyone well, and that God blesses everyone who's watching, and you.
Great. Thanks, Leonard.